Hey, Casey, I am so excited to be here with you and to talk to you a little bit about fatherhood. And I have been following your Instagram, and I love, like, first of all, how open you are to the vulnerabilities of being a dad, the kind of, sometimes it's hard, the I love your post about just taking mental health breaks every once in a while. That was like,
Yeah.
it definitely flows with a lot of the stuff that, even with me, Flojo, the type of products I want to create, that always kind of thinks about that, those kind of balance of, like,
hmm
there's the persona that you want to put out there, but there's also a certain authentic and genuineness that needs to be there for people to connect. And I think that you've done it. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I mean, people often label social media as this place, you take the entire Facebook and Instagram as key examples of just like it's always positive all the time. It's a highlight reel. It's only the good things that happen in people's lives. And I'm like, parenting is not that. Parenting is not that at all. There's a lot of things that have definitely made me a better man, becoming a father. And I think that if I were to imagine what my life has looked like for the last 8 years without my kids, I don't think I would be operating to the potential of who I could be without them. But at the same time, they are super annoying at times. There's a lot of times where I'm just kind of like, why did I make this decision? I'm very confused. And so it's the dichotomy of the two of those at any given time. So when I put out anything, I'm just kind of like, I have to show this from the multiple lenses of what's going on, because it's very rarely so much one thing or the other. There'll be moments that are very, very they're outliers on the emotional spectrum, but for the most part it's a hot mess all the time, a hot mess of emotion and experience all mixed into one.
I think that happens right until 18, possibly a little further. I'm sorry about
Oh no.
real talks, real talks. And I know you celebrated your anniversary. I saw that
Yes.
post, like, last week, was it, or like a couple weeks ago?
Was it? How was time even work anymore? Yeah, it was about a week and a half ago now. So thank you. Yeah, 10 years of marriage and 13 and a half together. And yeah. As I like to say to Sarah, I'm like, hey, here's to another 10. She's like, that's it? That's all you're giving us? I'm like, I'm at
One
least.
step at a time. One step. Oh, so what have you learned from having, like, this Instagram out there for fathers? Like, what have you learned from the people who are following you? Any surprises
Mhm.
there?
You know what? A ton. One of the important things that really comes to mind when it comes to fatherhood is that my experience may not be representative of so many other experiences in the various circles I touch, right? So there's Black fatherhood, Canadian fatherhood, being a married dad or a dad of 7 and 5 year old boys. Like, if we even take a look at those four areas, my experience is my experience and may not reflect everyone else's. And what I'm starting to really realize is, where does the common ground lie between myself and other dads, and what is just uniquely my own story. And it's proven something that I really need to be aware of, because as the audience grows, as I mature in what I do, I want to make sure that not only am I representing myself correctly and being able to articulate my story, but also understanding where I can build bridges with everyone else to make sure that I'm not just writing for myself. I want to write as a service to my community around me, so that as I learn lessons, as I find out about new resources, these are things I can share with them to better not only my life but theirs as well.
That's amazing. And what does fatherhood mean to you then?
It's this weird sacrificial thing, right? You're willing to give up everything you have for the sake of these little beings you call your children, but in a different way than moms do, I feel. In that, I always relate it back to a stand-up sketch by Trevor Noah, and the premise is that you have this kid, you know and he's about to be attacked. I believe it's by a lion. And so a mom would take that situation and say, no, not my child. You cannot have them. Take me instead. Whereas a dad would be like, I'm going to save you. I don't know how you got yourself into this situation. That was a dumb move. I don't want to have to do this, but it's obligatory that I save you from this line. So it's like it's not even begrudging. It's just kind of like you know you have to do everything you need to do for your children, but it's very much from a critical perspective where we're like, I'll do everything I can for you. I don't have to like it, but I will.
I like that. And do you feel? 'Cause I know, like, with when I created the dad's bucket list, one of the things that I really wanted to make sure is that I started to see kind of a lot of my friends who are having kids starting to feel the pressures that
Mm,
I think women have felt for a long time of, like, making the perfect family portrait, or kids learning things at the right time and all this stuff.
mm-hmm,
And when I saw that kind of happening to guys, I saw this sort of, I guess, language out there that was saying, "Oh, good, dads deserve it. Dads deserve to kind of be in that hot seat right now." But I never felt that way, because I don't think that you necessarily, like my dad growing up. I mean, he had his phases. Now he's definitely a dad, like a daughter.
yep.
He has the dad daughter combo. He has it, but it took a while for him to grow. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that background to necessarily
Mm-hmm.
be that dad that they want to be. Like, do you feel that pressure? Do you feel like it's changing of what it means to be a dad, or what you have to look like as a dad?
Yep. I think you described it really well because I've been creating content around fatherhood since day one. So like November 2013. And the reaction people have to fatherhood has changed quite a bit. In the beginning, it was like, the dad is a babysitter, or the entire idea of like, now you know how moms feel, like suck it. And I was like, whoa, people, like stop, like, slow your roll. And it's become a lot less like, as we look at the modern dad now, it's more along the lines of the equality of parenthood, that that moms and dads should almost equally be able to do just about anything as parents, and we're starting to get towards there. But with that said, there's still, there's two parts of it, where there's a stigma against dads being able to do everything, and as well as a much larger section of dads who aren't stepping up than I am comfortable with and originally imagined. And so there's a long way to go still, to get to a point where dads can, I guess, feel that they fully have found their place in the entire spectrum of fatherhood, or parenthood, I should say. But we're getting there. It's changed a lot over the last, decade alone, and it will continue to, as more dads are involved in multiple areas of kids' lives, and they can see dads, doing the household chores, showing up for school events, mending their clothes. Like there's all sorts of things that if we normalize, the parental gender roles a lot more, then it gets to a place where it's just like the entire potential of what it means to be a father will expand with it.
Hmm. I like that, because I think about when I was growing up. My dad was my French braid maker. He was the sewer. He was, if
Nice.
there was something very big that like exquisite that he had to cook, he was doing it. But it was always very silent. Like no one really talked about it, and he's definitely like grown into it now, doesn't care. But I think that
Hmm.
in the beginning there was that, and it always made me feel kind of like odd. Like dads can be, you know, this other side, and
Hmm.
I love the idea of kind of showing that out there. And that being said, like, what do you think? Um, I always love asking this question. It's kind of like, what do you think is either your favorite moment that you had in the past when you were a child, or the favorite dad moment that you've had with your kids, if you could name one? I
Wow.
know it's
That's a really good question, in that there's just, I'm starting to understand more about my parents and their relationship with us, because you forget so many of the middling moments, and you remember the really good ones and the really bad ones the longer you're at this, right? And so I didn't have the opportunity to have too many memories with my dad because he was always so busy working. But I do remember, like, we went to this Jays game in the 100 level, probably like, oh, I have to get my years right here. I think it was like in the 93 season. So they'd won a World Series, and, we were there, and it was really good seats. And because they just won the World Series, the tickets would have probably been really expensive, and my parents didn't have a ton of money. So that's kind of like the one moment where I'm just kind of like, okay, like we're in our zone and everything's awesome. At the same time, when I was getting married, I literally threw a tantrum by like flailing around the floor because I did not want to listen to what he was had to say anymore. I was like, nope, no. And my now wife was just kind of like, what am I marrying it? What is this? What are you doing? Why you're 27? Why are you acting like a child? And it's like it's that it's some things you just can never let go of when it comes down to growing up. And then with the kids now, it's like there's so many moments where I'm just kind of like, I have to frame all the good and bad that happens with them in the context of them being Sarah and my children and the fact they got their traits from somewhere. And so there'll be times where like they give me like the perfect sassiest answer for something and I'm just like that's me. That's me. You've ooh, that stings. It's like, and then it's like every time I want to say something like that to someone in the future, I'm like, I can't say it anymore because I'm like, I know what it feels like. I'm like, oh, that hurts.
But you're kind of proud.
Oh, hella proud. Definitely. I'm like, well done. I can't show you the applause, but that was excellent. That was excellent.
We'll talk about this someday when you're older. Yeah, I love those. And like, okay, and because this is like I create bucket lists. Is there like
Mhm.
those bucket list moments that you can't wait to share with your kid? Is there certain moments that are kind of crystallized?
Ooh, I have something super specific. Okay. Super specific.
I like it.
The year before my first son was born, my wife and I joined some friends who were traveling the world, and we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the like hardest things I've done in my life. It was grueling on the body, but when I got to the top of it, 19,300 feet above sea level, and you see the curve of the earth and nothing impeding your view of the sunrise, like it was nuts. Like you don't see anything like that. And that's something I want to share with the kids when they're old enough. So, when I'm, let's say 50, they'll be like 20 and 18. So we're kind of thinking along the lines of like, when they're finally adults and we could kind of figure things out and they're able-bodied, we don't have to like carry their backpacks and their snacks for them and all that stuff. That's something I definitely would want to do with them when they get older, because I feel like, between that and then we also got to visit some Maasai tribes and go on safari for the week after we climbed the mountain. Those are experiences that have definitely shaped how I look at possessions, at space, at what one needs to sustain a lifestyle, etc. And I think it would only make them better people or better members of society to experience something that's so opposite from what they're used to. So that's
Mhm.
like my big bucket list thing I want to do eventually.
And if you could fast forward to your kids being your age and looking back at their childhood, like what do you want them to be thinking about how you were as a dad or how you are?
Oh, I already tell them this right now at 7 and 5 that if I were to die tomorrow, I'd be one of reincarnated as one of my children because their life is amazing. I'm just like, you don't even understand. Like, I look back at like my childhood now, I was like, I get it, mom and dad. I get you. You're like, you went from here and you wanted to provide this for us. And like, I went from here and just went like off the chart was like, I'm going to give you everything for like 5 years or so. And I was like, I've done too much. I've ruined you, and we need to scale it back. Nope, this is too much. Like my the first one, he was like basically a vegetarian. He would not touch meat until he tasted like Wagyu beef. And then after that, he's like, oh, this is delicious. Like, no, no, this is not your standard. No. The other day, these kids told me that they're tired of McDonald's and pizza. And I'm like, I've ruined you. I've ruined you. It's over. I
It used to
can't,
be like a snack growing. That was like the best thing ever. With
right?
I
I was
would
just like,
for doctor's appointments for that McDonald's trip.
I'm like, where did I go so wrong? That's like, no, dad, we only do A&W now. It's like, while I don't disagree, it's
Yeah,
like kids usually love McDonald's. What is wrong with you two? Anyway, so
I love it. I love it. What advice would you give? And this is going to be my last question. But what advice would you give to new dads out there who maybe haven't found your Instagram? Hopefully, they will now, but are just kind of waiting around in the ocean trying to figure things out.
yeah, it's tough out there for dads. I mean, the biggest thing I've found as a dad is to find your people, find your community, because um, being a dad can be super isolating. When we had our first kid, we were pretty much the first people in our social circle to have kids, and it changed everything. Like, you can't do the things you used to do. You don't even find as much value perhaps in the things you used to do before kids, the going out to events and parties, and uh didn't have the same feeling it did anymore, because you knew you had to wake up in the middle of the night and do a feed, or you have other responsibilities that came with it. So what we needed to do is find other parents really with young children were going through what we're going through, and learn, and we could all learn collectively from it. And so I think it's super important to find peers who are going what you're going through, and then and especially if they're local, because then you can learn from each other. You can figure out, the school system together, the activities around you, what there is to offer together. And it's really in the scope of having that, that entire saying of "it takes a village" is so true, because if you're trying to do it on your own, it's already hard enough. Like, you're only making it harder. So it's super important to find the people who can, if not champion you, at least help prop you up. Like, even now, it's just knowing that I have 15 to 20 families in the neighborhood where I can offload my kids if they're getting too bored. I'm like, go to this kid's house. Just go over there and you'll be fine.
Be their problem for
So
a
yeah. Yeah. Just give me a few hours of being someone else's problem. But just go.
then they all come back. Oh, I think that's great advice, and I think that your Instagram kind of shows, because it shows the ins and outs of every day, and also this great representation of what being a supportive husband and father is like, and those, that prosciutto bouquet that you gave your wife for Mother's Day, my lord. I immediately
Thank you.
for whatever that was, because I'm like, I must have. But just kind of showing that kind of personality out there, and showing that it's like you're still this cool dad, and you're doing all these things, and you're supportive, and you're vulnerable and stuff, and you're kind of showing another face. I mean, I love that. That's the epitome, which is why you got the dad's bucket list, why I gave it to you, because I think you're like that epitome of that ooh. Look at that product. Product placement. But that's why, I mean, you're like one of the dads that, like, I don't think you might necessarily need it, but it can help you out for those days that you're trying to figure out after the pandemic
Thank you.
what you could possibly do that's new.
We've already been using it in the pandemic, because my eldest is learning to read. So we'll draw a card and read it together, and he'll be like, "Good idea or bad idea? Do you want to do this one? Do you want to do another one?" And it keeps them involved with decision making through the days, because I think one of the big things about the pandemic, about parenting in the pandemic, has been, how do you fill your time with things to do? And we will take any tool that is useful to make things more interesting every day, because you can get into a routine and kids get bored, and when kids get bored, it's trouble. So do not downplay the
Scrolling
box was
away,
worked well.
scrolling away all their energy to get back to you later. It will come back to haunt you. I love it. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and I just loved every bit of it and meeting you.
Thanks, Tiffany. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll just put the plug in there for everyone. Get this box. You won't be bored. It'll be really, really good for you. So do it. And I hope everyone makes it through the rest of this ridiculous pandemic and gets back to a life where we can go outside and do all sorts of fun stuff, because there's a big world out there just waiting for us.
Exactly. Thank you. Brian?